Let me ask you, because this is something I've thought about before. I've expressed thoughts. People don't agree, but in a future world, I don't know whether it's a decade away, 2 decades, 3 decades away, but I don't see a world where everything is decentralized. I just don't. I think certain things are better centralized because you have to have people making decisions, and therefore you have to have governance processes. And I think some things will be decentralized. Something like a stable coin, I find it hard. I found it hard to find a truly decentralized stablecoin that I don't think will depeg. Now, I know centralized ones can be, but a fully transparent, fully backed centralized stablecoin should hold a peg if it was transparent.
Well, I mean, the humor of this market is that Tether is the one coin that has remained holding its peg pretty closely, even in spite of all the criticism that it's received from fudsters, right? Like maybe Tether doesn't have its backing. Who knows? I'm not auditing it, but it blows my mind that Tether is the one that seems to have ironically survived this world where everyone's saying that Tether is definitely going down, and Luna is the safest security that's ever given you 20% returns. It's absurd. And I think the other thing that's really interesting for me is, if you look at the history of finance, you have all of these examples where people have done, particularly like examples of leverage. A good example in the 90s that, if you've been here long enough, you know about, but LTCM, long-term capital management, ironically named, had all of these Russian...
Was that?
What's that?
I've never head of it.
You've never heard of long-term capital management? Okay, well, it was a firm started by, I think, Fisher Black, of the Black-Scholes formula and a few others, like lots of... They had 2 or 3... Nobel Prize winning, I think it was Fisher Black, Nobel Prize winning economists start this company. The idea of it was they were going to do as much basically arbitrage as they could. Arbitrage generally in the financial sense means riskless returns, right? So they're rare. They're really hard to find, these opportunities. And when you do, you can make a lot of money. But what they were going to do is leverage the fuck out of their portfolio so that they could make money on arbitrage opportunities that were like quarters of a penny, reducing spreads by tenths of a penny, hundredths of a penny. It was a sort of like the Office Space scheme. Mm-hmm. They did this because of their relationships and the people in the firm. They ran up, I don't remember what it was, but I think they had something like maybe 10 billion, 3 to 10 billion under management, and had like $3 trillion in leverage. Mm-hmm. And what happened is, they'd set these up, all of their trades in such a way as they would, if there were failures, they would cascade, right? If this failed, they were kind of like the financial equivalent of like a prop bet, right? They had like 10 bets, all that, as long as none of them broke down, but it's arbitrage, so they're riskless, right? And then one day, Russia wakes up. Vladimir Putin wakes up, and he says, the Russian economy starts to fail. And he says, those bonds, how about we make good on them to Russians only, but not to foreigners? So that's a good Russian accent, right?
That's pretty good.
So they decide not to pay out I think it was bondholders that were not national. They were not in Russia. So all of a sudden, like all of these Russian bets that they have, which are part of this like cascading portfolio, aren't going to get paid. So LTCM goes into crisis. There's like $3 trillion on the table in the 90s. This collapse, this like has a potential to collapse the economy. The Fed gets involved. Everyone gets involved. So this is the first time the Fed gets together. They meet with everybody and they say, okay, banks, we're fucked. The whole economy is about to go. So we need someone to like back LTCM. And all of the banks like basically agree to do this except one. Bear Stearns.
Irony.
It's not ironic. In fact, there's a lot of people who strongly believe that the failure of Bear Stearns later was revenge for this.
Right.
So Bear Stearns,
who are we going to bail out?
Yeah, exactly. So Bear Stearns in LTCM refuses basically to like help with this, and the other banks all get in and basically do this first like sort of bailout. LTCM attempts to sell to everybody. They attempt to sell to Warren Buffett. I think Warren Buffett rejects them at the price they asked for because they really didn't like I believe he sent them, I think it was through fax machines because again, the 90s. I think he offered them like a fraction of the amount that they thought they were worth. And they're like, we can hold out, no biggie. So they didn't sell to him early on. And that would have probably been enough because he could have like weathered the storm.
Oh, no, it's just Leon Black.
Leon Black?
You said he didn't sell to Leon.
No, to Warren Buffett.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you said Leon.
No, to Warren Buffett. So like Warren Buffett had, I believe he offered a certain amount. So like what happened, like a fraction of what they really thought they were worth, and they rejected it, and then no one else wanted to buy them. So they got like basically liquidated. And what's interesting is if you analyze their bets over time, if it had been able to be held, they would have been wildly wealthy. These bets were all great. You
found it, Danny?
I mean, I found the story, yeah. Do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, put it up. Let's have a look. LCTM was wildly successful from 1994 to 1998, attracting more than $1 billion of investor capital with a promise of arbitrage strategy. However, LTCM's highly leveraged trading strategies failed to pan out and it suffered monumental losses. Monumental. The reverberations felt across the financial landscape. Ultimately, the US government had to step in and arrange a bailout. Keep going. Don't worry about the business model.
John Merriweather.
The demise. When Russia defaulted on its debt in August 1998, LTCM was holding a significant position in Russian government bonds. High leverage nature coupled with a financial crisis in Russia led to the hedge fund to sustain massive losses and be in danger of default in its own loans. This made it difficult for LCTM to cut its losses in fixed positions. Held a huge, totaling roughly 5% of the total global fixed income market. Jesus. When losses approached $4 billion, the federal government of the United States feared the imminent collapse of LCTM would precipitate a large financial crisis and orchestrated a bailout to calm the markets. A $3.65 billion loan was created, which enabled LCTM to survive the market volatility and liquidate in an orderly manner in early 2000. What happened to there was no crime there. They were just...
No, there's no crime. I mean, the real crime is the banks that lent to them. If there was a crime, they used their connections basically, and these banks bypassed their internal mechanisms, thinking like these guys have Nobel prizes, it's no problem. And secretly, what they were doing is going from bank to bank basically and getting it's the same
3
thing.
hours.
Yeah, they were going from bank to bank and secretly getting leverage from them, and all of the banks were extending more leverage than they would have normally given on any given day. And if I recall, Bear Stearns was the only bank that was exercising prudence, which is why they were like, fuck that, at the end of all of this. Because it was a crisis caused by imprudence in the market and basically banks not abiding by their normal standards and regulations, because they decided that these oracles were going to definitely make good on their returns, that there's nothing that these people could do that wouldn't be astoundingly genius, and that it's arbitrage, so it's fucking riskless, right? So it's riskless until, and this is the thing that happens in financial markets. No one seems to realize that there are no rules. They think that the rules of the financial markets exist and that we know how they operate, but we don't realize that the rules can change at any moment, and anyone can change them, anyone with power. So in this case, Putin does something unprecedented. He stands up and he goes, we're not paying foreign debt, which no one had ever done before.
Well, do you know what? We just did it to him.
Well, right? Well, we took a lot of their money away. But yeah, they're not holding bonds. Like, we didn't cancel their bonds, right?
The treasuries.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with what we're doing to Russia right now.
On treasuries bonds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's like 60 billion of treasuries.
Yeah, so we've farted on them now.
Yeah,
but
take that.
In this case, they were basically willing to default on global bonds for anybody, even anyone that was holding bonds outside of Russia, and no one had seen anything like that before.
But you say there's no rules. There's rules for the little guy.
There's no rules.
There's rules for the little guy.
There's rules for the little guy sometimes. There's rules until the rules are constructed and deconstructed by those who have power. So I guess the little guy has no power, so he has to abide by the rules.
But he gets fucked when, I've talked about it on the show so often, but in The Big Short, brilliant film, the thing that always leaves me is the end, where you see the family packing up their car because they've lost their house.
Yeah.
They got screwed. Probably, I can't remember. How many people lost their home in 2008 financial crisis, Danny? In the US, it was like a 7-figure number. I don't know if it's 1-2 million, but A lot of people lost their homes, and these are hard-working people. Went to work, they played by the rules, right? They went to work, they did their job, they paid their mortgage. Boom, financial crisis because of stupid, irresponsible products that were created, leverage in the market, rehypothecation, and when it all unwinds, yeah, a couple of big banks fail, nobody goes to jail.
Everyone loses their job.
Everyone loses their
their mortgage.
Yeah, and it's the ability that people can risk the entire financial markets, not just the country but the world, just for greed, just to make
About 10 million people.
10 million.
10 million.
Can you read? What was it saying?
It says about 10 million Americans lost their homes during the financial crisis or were displaced.
But I wonder the amount of people actually involved in the decision making that led to the creation of these products. You know, you might be talking about a few thousand people.
What are the products you're talking about that caused this? What do you think caused this?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about what caused it, you can go back to different points in history. You can go back to Clinton changing the rules of the housing game because they wanted to put more people into homes. So they changed it. What was the borrowing rate? They got rid of the 20% rate. I can't remember the details because it was a long time ago. Was it Glass-Steagall they repealed or something? So they repealed Glass-Steagall. Remind me, is that the responsibility of the banks?
I can't remember.
So I know, I haven't looked at this for a long time, but I know under the Clinton administration, they wanted more people in homes. So they made it easier for banks to provide loans, and therefore they repealed Glass-Steagall or something. Now, anyone listening, if I've got that wrong, don't call me a dumbass. There's a lot to remember, and I can't. But there was something under the Clinton administration that made the banks more responsible. So you can go back as far as that. There's probably things you can go back to before that. But that's the start of the creation of products and contagion. That's the start of the creation of risks within the banks.
So I tend to think most risk in the financial sector is much like LTCM cascading risk.
Yes.
There's these levels of risk that we have. There's like level 1, level 2, level 3. And if any of these cards are pulled out, all of a sudden, it's particularly when it comes to leverage, all of a sudden the whole card castle that you've built collapses, right? And I mean, there's I think a lot of this, even you can go back even further to the 2-income households, where people have in a world where both the man and the woman in the house work. You end up with like people going out and overextending themselves because they're buying things like homes based on 2 incomes. It's actually Elizabeth Warren wrote a book called The 2-Income Gap, which is literally about this specific problem. And it's basically saying that people, like it used to be that, let's say that you had a house, you had to pay a mortgage, whatever. You get fired from your job. Well, your wife would go and be a secretary for 6 months as you looked for a job, and then you'd go find a job. And during that time, you could pay the mortgage, right? Well, in a world where both people work, they're both maximally employed, they're both making good money. What do you do when you're making, let's say you're both bringing in $5,000 a week or every 2 weeks, so $10,000, $20,000 a month. You're going to go buy a home that's, $1 million, maybe $2 million, let's say $2 million. And you're not saving a lot. You're going to be taking all of your money pretty much every month, putting it towards a mortgage, maybe saving a few thousand. But in the end, when it comes down to it and the economy turns and you both lose your jobs, you might have 8 months of mortgage money saved. And in a bad economy, you might not be able to get a job that pays anywhere near what you had. So this is like all of these things. That was one of them. And then in addition to that, you're right, the 90s changes in mortgage stuff and et cetera, et cetera, et
How
cetera.
many people do you think have got 8 months breathing room?
Oh, very few, but very few.
Yeah,
but I'm being very generous. I'm trying to be very generous.
I know people who haven't got 2 months breathing room.
Yeah. Well, as an adult, it's really interesting because when I was a kid, I remember thinking to myself, if I had $1 million, I'd buy an airplane. If I had $1 million, I'd, something, I'd have the biggest house you've ever seen. And now as an adult, I don't know how people who are responsible can survive on any of these amounts. It blows my mind that because the expenses that come with things like $1 million mortgage or anything like that, the impending expenses are things that you would never have considered as a kid. $1 million mortgage is what, $15,000 a month, something like that.
No.
10,000 a month?
No, I would have thought. I mean, it depends. It depends on the rates you get in now. If you go back a year when you could get 2% interest rates, I would have thought $1 million would be what, 4,000 a month?
something like that. But now it's like 4.5%.
Well, for some
So
people, it's
8,000,
6,
8,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for most Americans. Like that means that, like, let's say it's 8,000 a month,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so you're still talking what, $96,000 a year that you have to put towards your house. Like most people don't think about the fact that they have to, like that's income that has to come in. You have $1 million, like you can do that for 10 years. But that's without eating or anything else. So like you have to be making a significant income to like be able to afford these things. And I think what's really interesting is like in places like the housing market and whatnot, like you really do have these cascading failures where people believe that, and it's the same as the crypto market now. People believe that will always be the state of things. And I think people don't realize that like literally the state of nature is to be impoverished. You come into this world naked, you have nothing with you. And if you the state of nature is to like go into the forest and grow potatoes and just, not have money and have nothing. That's a state of nature. And nature wants to bring you back there. And what people do is, I see this in crypto all the time. Like, I really deserved this money. I put money into Luna and I made $4 million and now I'm poor and I just can't believe it. I've lost everything. Like nobody I know no one I've ever seen get rich deserved their wealth. They worked really hard. They set up mechanisms. They preserve it. They make a lot of really good decisions. But you are one absolutely insane decision, and not even necessarily knowing it's insane, one decision away from complete impoverishment.
Dude, you're not just one decision away. You're one personal decision, or you're one decision by somebody else away from.
Yeah, but this is like if you put your money into Wells Fargo and you have, I don't know, $100 million in one bank account there, and Wells Fargo collapses tomorrow. What, the FDIC has you insured to what, 250 or something like that? I'm sure you can buy like additional insurance, but maybe you got rich, not knowing how those products work. So you haven't. So they give you 250K back. You made 100 million, they give you 250,000. Like that isn't your decision. But that's what I'm saying is like the state of nature is that there's like the entire world is in constant decay and everything is turning. It's sort of like this very like sort of Buddhist concept, right? Where Wells Fargo at some point is going to fail. We don't know when. It might be 100 years from now. But you put your money in there, you're putting your money in a hot potato. Every one of us is putting our money into hot potatoes. And some hot potatoes just kind of get cooked faster. Luna's a great example. So like it's very difficult. That's actually what I like about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is the ability for the first time to actually like use the principles of the universe, entropy, the decay of the universe is the thing that guards my money. And the decay of the universe is the thing that we use to develop more Bitcoins, right? And that's literally what's amazing about Bitcoin is it acknowledges this fact that the decay is in fact like the state of nature is to be impoverished. And it doesn't matter if you have your Bitcoin on a ledger, you can still get it back later. If you hold it, it's a dangerous thing to do. But I think that's also the case is like, not to ramble too much, but like
that's why we got you here.
Yeah. Well, I'm rambly, but the idea that like in terms of compensation for risk. So like when you put your money into a bank, you kind of assume it's going to be there. Well, it's not always the case. Like Ukraine saw huge amounts of money lost back in the 80s and the 90s. Banks failed. In America in the 30s, we had huge bank failures. And again, in the 2000s, well, in the 2000s, the saving grace was, in fact, the insurance backing the banks, whether it was SIPC or FDIC. The insurance backing the banks was their saving grace.
Not if you're in Cyprus.
Well, except in Cyprus, yeah, where they haircut everybody. And if you were rich, you were allowed to get out of Cyprus, right? There were a lot of people that were wealthy that moved their money. So, people don't understand, and I don't know that they can, the risks that they're taking on when they do anything, when they like buy stocks or when they put their money into Celsius or when they put their money into, a hedge fund or a VC firm, or when they take a huge amount of unilateral risk and put all of their money into like new startups as a VC, if they themselves want to be the VC. People don't seem to understand the risk that they're taking on. And it's amazing to me because every single time in the crypto cycle, we see the exact same outcomes constantly.